Scott here with Abundance Coaching TV, and welcome. This is awesome. And yeah, it's just amazing that we are actually here right now, and I apologize for the delay because we actually were going to get here a little bit earlier at 7 o'clock Central Standard Time, but we actually had to go to a plan B. We had to go to a new camera just with some of our tests there. But thank you for hanging around. Thank you for being with us. And it's just going to be awesome just to share with you some of the passion that I have and that I want you to hear with Abundance Coaching TV. First of all, I want to set the stage for what we're going to talk about today. And feel free to communicate with Kelly. Kelly's actually going to be our tech guy for the day. And he's been live and on the chat with you. And you probably all explored how to use the chat here with Livestream. And that's amazing. And I just think that Livestream is an incredible source for us to just get our messages out there into the world. Another thing that is really cool is just to have the privilege of communicating in this way. I know there's people from around the world. There's people I know that are on the chat right now are from Sydney, and there's people actually from South Africa and from Serbia and from America, Canada, all over the world, and even Argentina. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for being online. Quick shout out for Katie, our production assistant, and she's up in South Africa, and this is the middle of the night for her. Shout out for Adam. He's actually doing some of our technical stuff, and he's actually been working it like crazy here trying to get Plan B working for us. And I'm glad actually that he's here, and I couldn't have done it without him. And of course, a shout out for Kelly Goyer, who's helping me out. He's been on our Abundance Coaching team for a while here, and it's been awesome to have him on the team as well. So today the topic is about stories. The topic is, everyone has a story, what's yours? And the truth is that everyone does have a story, but some of us minimize our stories, or we don't think that our story is important enough. And we diminish our value by saying, okay, well, you know, somebody else has a better story, so we can't do something. We can't achieve something. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about my story. And then I want to share with you an interesting story from one of my clients. And some people you might think would have written him off. And his name is Victor. And I think that when you actually hear his story, you'll be really touched by it. In the midst of it too, we're going to actually interview Jaqueline. And Jaqueline is an awesome person when it comes to stories and also just motivation. And she's been someone in my networks for a while, and I'm really excited about interviewing her. And she has an incredible story, and she's going to be one of our guests here today. In addition to that, Kelly's going to come on the show a little bit later on as well. So what's Abundance Coaching? What is it all about? Like, why are you even here? Abundance Coaching is actually a part of a dream that I've had for a long time. And the dream that I have is to reach thousands of people and have them have transformation and have them have change. I believe that there's people out there that really want abundance in their life. I believe that there's people out there that want more than abundance in life. They actually want to know that they realistically can walk in that. And I feel that I've developed a lot of tools and experience, and through my life coaching practice, that I can bring those inspiring stories of success. I can bring the inspiring stories of people who are living in their passion, who live in abundance, so that you can feel and know that you can achieve that too. Essentially, abundance coaching and what I feel abundance coaching is helping people connect with their authentic, amazing self so that they can live with passion and have abundance in life. So you might ask, okay, well, what does that mean, Scott? Connecting with your authentic, amazing self. That sounds really nice. Well, everybody wants to have a connection. Deep down, you may not use that verbiage, but you want to have a connection. You want to connect in your relationships in your family, and you want to connect with your spouse if you're married. You want to connect with yourself, with your best self, with the best self that you are, the best version of you. You want connections, but you also want to be authentic. When you're authentic, you know who you are. You know what matters to you. You know where you're going. And when you're authentic and true to your spirit, true to yourself, there's power in that. And when you're genuinely walking down the path that you want and where you know that you need to go, there's incredible impact that can happen. The next part of it is amazing. And I think that there's not enough people that think they're amazing out there. I think that there's so many people out there that have not been told that they're amazing. And they may be living in a lot of limiting beliefs because of it. You are amazing. You're absolutely incredible. You have a story, and your story matters. And whatever you've come through to get to today, that matters. It's the journey that matters. It's where you're going that matters. And the question that I have for you is, if you were to die today, would you know that you told your story? Would you be certain that you told your story? Because you may minimize the impact that your story actually has, whatever your story is. I've coached people that have drug addictions. I've coached people that have other kinds of habits and addictions. I have a client who's a quadriplegic. Everybody has a story. Whether or not it's you've gone through a lot of tragic stuff or you haven't. I challenge you right now to think about your story and think about how it's important and how it's important to also communicate to the world. So I want to tell you a little bit about my story. I want to tell you about how I got into coaching and also about life. And this story actually starts in 2006. And for those that are in Australia, I saw my brother-in-law Kane is online. That's awesome. Hey, mate. In 2006, I was content. I was comfortable. I owned many properties out here in Saskatoon. And I just thought that that was just like the way that I would just produce my income. I at times had a lot of passion for rental properties. I built houses. That was just part of the fabric that I am. I'm an oldest brother of 8 kids. So part of me was just about taking responsibility. And I thought that there would be a good producer value in just buying and selling houses. And I was right. I also worked in IT. So I sold computers. And that was just a big part of my life here. But in 2006, I started to realize that there was something that I was missing. There was something that I didn't have. It was like God was stirring me in a way to know that there was something more for me in my life. And at that time, I actually started to contemplate some of my options. And I felt that for whatever reason, that I should go to Toronto. And there was nothing in Toronto in the previous time. I liked the Toronto Maple Leafs, but other than that, I didn't really have a draw to go to Toronto. But I just felt that in my spirit. And I started to sell my houses. In fact, I sold one of my houses and I bought a fancy orange car, my pumpkin. It was a Pontiac Grand Prix and it was supercharged. It was my car. But you thought, people ask me, it's like, why would you sell that car when you have all these rental properties? You need a truck. Or you need an SUV. You can haul around all the equipment and all of the stuff that you renovated with. But I bought a car. And then in September of 2006, I went to Toronto to actually go to a wedding. And at that wedding, I met Nicole. And Nicole was the most expensive dance that I ever had. But it was the best dance that I ever had. And we ended up long distance courting from Saskatoon all the way to Toronto, running up the phone bills. And I eventually said, you know what? I know that I need to do something different. And I told her about that. And she said, Scott, what about life coaching? And I didn't know what that was. I thought, it sounds interesting. She told me a little bit more. She knew a friend that was a life coach. And I thought, okay, I'll try this out. So I decided that I would move out there to Toronto, sell all my houses, give it all away. Not give it away, but give up all of the past that I knew wasn't in my passion, and I moved out to Toronto. And it was awesome. I got to court my girlfriend, and I was excited about that. But the pit is that for the first time in my entire life, I was somewhere where I had no knowledge of where I was going. I actually didn't know very many people. So I was a bit out of my comfort zone. I had all the things that I needed set up. I had my church, I had my family, I had my friends, I had my social stuff, I had my hockey, all the things in Saskatoon, but I was in Toronto. And the biggest thing for me, being a high producer, selling all your properties, all of a sudden I felt naked because I didn't have anything to do that was producing anything. I remember trying to apply for jobs. And I remember going all the way out to Scarborough from Etobicoke and getting stuck in traffic jams. And it was like 4 hours to get there and back. And I was like, wow, people do this. And it just wasn't me. I remember going to the high-rise buildings and working in those buildings. I worked in one place called CDW, and it was like an amazing job. It was incredible as far as like what I learned in sales. However, it was working in a cubicle, and my passion wasn't there. In the end, me and Nicole decided that we were going to get married, which was awesome. I asked her, which was the right way for me. And we did get married, and we decided we're going to move back to Saskatoon, where I'm from, where my family is. And when we moved back to Saskatoon, I actually enrolled in, actually it was back in Toronto, Nicole and I enrolled in the coach training program that I got graduated in later. And it was part of our story, but when I moved back to Saskatoon, I immediately went back into investing. I went and bought properties. And one of the properties that I purchased, I just bought just like that because I thought that I could go and I could invest all my time and money into this and I could flip it and make a lot of money. Now, in the previous times, I had bought and sold properties where I had made some money, but it was just on small suites that I rented. This time, I bought a property and it was a gutter. I mean, I had to strip it right down to the frame, build a brand new basement, do all the outside exterior, all the electric, all the plumbing, all brand new kitchen, rip it all out and basically restore the whole thing. And I thought I was going to make money. I kind of half did a budget for it, and I just started spending money. I had a little bit of money, so I spent a little bit of money. And it ended up taking away all of the aspects of my passion, which was me enrolling in this coach training program and moving forward with that. And I ended up taking all of that passion and I poured it into renovations. The reason I'm telling you all of this is for a lot of reasons actually, but the first reason is that sometimes we get scared of what really is what we should be doing. Sometimes we move into something because we're used to that something. And I was used to renovations. I was used to properties. That particular house ended up costing us way more money than I ever foresaw. And we put it up for sale, and it was for sale for 4 years. We did have renters at times. One of the renters totally just destroyed it with their dogs. And we ended up having to do more work on it. It was 45 minutes away from where we live, so it was a long drive, and I spent many nights away from my family during that time. I spent almost an entire year renovating this property. And that was just a long time for me. But it took away from me doing what I know now that I needed to do. In the end, I'm happy to say that I purchased, we sold that property. And that actually just happened here in October, so last month. And it was a big deal for us because for us it was more like an exit of that. And in the last 2 years, I've really flourished in coaching, and some of my clients are actually online with us right now. And it's just been an incredible experience for me to do what I know that I love. Because that property taught me a few things, in spite of the pit that it was. Money and time and everything else taken away from family. It taught me that I actually have an opportunity to look at the positives of that story and say, I really am not that passionate about it. It allowed me to let go of that aspect of my life to move into what I really know and need and totally know is my passion and my sweet spot. And for the clients that are online right now, you'll know that I talk about the stepping in part. A lot of times in life we go 80%. And what I mean by that is that we actually go a lot of the way, but we don't step in that extra 20%. And that extra 20% is where all of the momentum happens. That's where all of the fun stuff happens, the exciting stuff happens. But we step in, but we step in 80%. What would happen if in your life you decided that you were going to step in that extra 20%? I know for me, when I decided that I was going to step in that extra 20%, it came with some risks. But it came with a lot of rewards as well. I often say to my clients that 50% is basically just being born. You're generally natured towards something, you have gifts towards something, you can go 50% quite easily. Taking that extra 30% takes some work, takes some effort. But oftentimes we think we're all in with something. We think we're all in with our passion, we think we're all in with whatever it is. But we actually are only 80%. My challenge for you with your story is to step in and share your story. Like I shared part of my story just with you just now. And you know, it might not be as relatable for some people. Everybody has a story though, an important story, something that they need to share. And I challenge you to look at that as something that you can do, that you can step in, and that you can appreciate the fact that you have a story, that you have something that matters, something that is important for you. So step into your story. All right. Wonderful. So there we go. So that's our intro. I hope you liked it. And at this time, I'm actually going to ask Jaqueline to come into the room here with me, to the studio. And Jaqueline has been, like I say, yeah, come in, woohoo! Yay! Good to see you, Jaqueline.
It's good to be here, thank you.
Awesome. And Jaqueline, you've been a friend of mine for about 5 years.
Yes, we have been friends.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you have a business called Speaking You. You do motivational speaking, and you have done motivational speaking, I know, for a long time when I first met you.
Yes, yes.
And right now you work with people. And would you want to share what capacity you work with people and what you do?
Sure. Thank you. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here, Scott.
Yeah.
And I love working with people. I've always said that I enjoy being thrusted into the sacred story of people, the sacred story that has sometimes terrain that is full of brokenness. And that's what I enjoy doing. I thrive in that, helping people enter into a place of self-awareness, of purpose, of being able to know that they don't have to be stuck in life. That there's a process for that, but there's hope. And so I work with different clients that have gone through all kinds of relational issues, relational brokenness, feeling stuck, feeling ashamed and guilty because they're unaware of what's going on with them, and people who, because of their upbringing, perhaps are unable to share it with anybody. The shame of just sharing that with somebody is too much, and so sometimes they keep those struggles secretive. And secrets have power, you know. And so we're very interesting human beings in that we don't want to live in fear, but we end up living in fear. And when we live in fear, it stops us. It sucks the life out of us. And I try to guide people finding their purpose again and finding their path to freedom, which to me is one of the most important things. So with Speaking You, what I do is I do that, but I also do motivational speaking, like you said. I love going into different places and sharing with people those things that help us move forward in life. So I do life skills as well. So anything from time management to leading to conflict management, name it. You know, I enjoy doing that as well. And that Speaking You encompasses all of that.
That's awesome. One thing that I've always recognized about you, Jaqueline, is your spirit. You're so happy, and you have such a big smile. You're so happy and you're alive, right? And how do you think that your attitude with life, like I know that you have a story and you've shared that story with me, but how is your attitude about life and overcoming things influenced you? And also, part B, how does that influence other people when you're coaching with them or leading them?
That is a very good question, Scott, because attitude is a very important part of the journey. I mean, our stories have many losses. Our stories have many endings. But with the endings and the losses come the beginnings and the opportunities and the gains.
Yeah.
And I think that I've been always the kind of person that has believed in possibilities and opportunities. My father really was the one that continually talked to me about that. And so I believe that I'm a strong believer that any time that there's a loss, there truly is an opportunity for gain. There's a new beginning. Yeah. And so I have tried very hard in the midst of my losses to be able to focus on the fact that this isn't the end of it. This is not the way it's going to be always.
Yeah.
Everything changes, right? Not everything lasts forever.
Yeah.
And so that is the focus that I've had. And despite everything that I've gone through, and I'll be sharing my story in a bit, despite all of that, I believe in life. I believe in myself.
Yeah.
I believe in that inner strength that every human being has to move forward, to step out of the place where they're at that creates scarcity.
Yes.
And so because of that, I think I have that positive spirit and that attitude. I shouldn't say, I can't say that I'm always effective with it. You know? We're human beings,
yeah,
right?
Of course.
So, but I try to keep perspective of the fact that that there is, I'm on a path, I'm in a direction, I'm on a journey, and that journey, the process of getting from point A to point B, has the terrain. It can shift and can change, and it's being aware of that, of all those changes and all those shifting that takes place. That will take me to where I'm supposed to be. Sometimes I don't even know where that is, but I end up there. How has that affected my influence with clients? You know, there are times when there have been clients who have said to me, how is it that you keep so positive? Where is it that you acquired your wisdom? And I keep saying to them, it is something that I intentionally work on. Yeah. It's not something that all of a sudden happens and I wake up every morning and I'm like, way to go. No, it's not like that. It's a habit. It's a pattern that I have chosen to follow. Yeah. And so it's intentional. Yeah. It's very purposeful. Yeah. And sometimes I lose it and then I come back to it. And so that's what I continually instill in the clients, knowing that anybody and everybody is able to enter into that path. Awesome.
That's so cool. That's so good. And I'm glad that you mentioned intentions as well.
Yes.
Intentions are such a huge, huge, huge difference maker. Before you go into something, you set intentions. And before I came into this first TV show for Abundance Coaching TV, I set intentions. I wanted to connect with people. I said it at the beginning. You didn't know that, but I'll tell you now. I wanted to connect with people. I wanted to connect with you. I wanted to connect with you and to myself. I wanted to be authentic. I didn't want to just like show you a whole bunch of flash and shows and stuff. I wanted to be real, and that's part of where the story came out. And I was thinking about, okay, how am I going to introduce this Abundance Coaching TV? And I thought, you know what, let's talk about stories. Let's talk about your story. And I wanted to connect and have authenticity for you. And I wanted to make sure that they knew that they're amazing. Yeah. And how does that change? I'm sure we didn't discuss this earlier, but how does that change to hold those type of intentions?
You need to be very aware of what the intention is. And sometimes in the midst of struggles, it's very difficult to hold on to that. It's very difficult to know this is where I'm heading, because in the midst of struggle and pain, you don't know where you're heading. Yeah. So the intention becomes very small. It doesn't have to be a huge goal ahead of you. You know, you don't have to think about 2-3 years in the future. You think about today. What is the intention behind today? Yeah. And you work with that. And so again, it's little steps, it's little choices. Every choice takes you to the next bigger choice. Excellent. Very cool.
So I brought you on because I know you have a story. And you knew that our topic of the day is going to be telling stories.
Yes.
So Would you share part of your story with us? Just
Absolutely.
as much as you want to share.
Yeah.
I understand that some of it, you
Yes.
won't want to necessarily share live, but
Mhm.
just share. And also, when you share your story, can I ask you a favor? Could you actually weave it in such a way that someone on the other side could take something away?
Mhm.
And I know that you do that
Mhm.
anyway, but
Mhm.
just to be intentional with that.
Sure. Well, stories are big. And your story, Scott, is big, and my story is very big, and it's very hard to know where to start. So you kind of have to think about what is it that I hope that you take from the story and then mention or tell that part of it. And so tonight, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on the part of my story that entails losses. And this took place, it started, my whole life I've had losses, but one of the most recent losses is one that I experienced 6 years ago when my marriage was falling to pieces. It was falling apart, and I lived for 2 years in a very unhappy and a very miserable marriage. Not for any other reason than the fact that I was miserable in it, and from the side of my husband at the time, there wasn't any, it didn't seem like there was a cooperative spirit to be able to resolve what was taking place. And so for 2 years, I lived in what I call, what I'd like to describe as comfortably miserable. Because I was miserable, he was miserable, but we somehow decided that we would stay within that misery. Because it was a lot easier to fit into that, and less scary to continue within that than to make choices that would lead us to the next segment or part of our lives. And so I lived like that for 2 years, and then finally 4 years ago, when life became intolerable, I decided at that point that I would remove myself from the marriage, and so I decided to separate at that time. What made things a little bit more difficult, however, was the fact that at the time I was also a pastor at a church in Saskatoon. And I think that one of the toughest part of my journey was not only the fact that I was experiencing a failure, what I described at that point as a failure in my marriage, but also what I was always used to and accustomed to, which was to be a part of a ministry in the church. That I knew would have its consequences, because within the church context, the fact that you would have a crumbling marriage as a leader is not necessarily something that is accepted or tolerated, and harshly judged. And so what was very interesting, that was the fact that for the 2 years that I lived in misery, I was able as a pastor to partake in everything that a pastor is able to. So I was able to preach, and I was able to counsel, and I was able to baptize, and I was able to do many things within the church, so long as the church didn't know that my life was miserable and that my marriage was falling to pieces. But upon the decision to leave the church, to leave the marriage, things changed. And at that point, the church had a very difficult time knowing how to handle me, but they were pretty good. They gave me an 8-week leave, and that was wonderful. But the 8 weeks leave was for me to ensure that my marriage was restored. Well, we cannot restore a marriage within 8 weeks. So came back to the church and so forth. To make a very long story short, within a year after I returned to the church, the pastor had given me the opportunity to work with 3 people who would come alongside me and would listen to the entire story with all the details. And so I walked with them, and they were going to give recommendation as to whether I would be ordained eventually within the church. And unfortunately, however, and I will never know for sure the reason, upon the moment when I actually told the pastor that I would be divorcing, and that would be a decision that was inevitable. Upon explaining that to him, verbally saying that to him, a week later, unfortunately, one of my greatest fears came to realization, and that was not only that I was losing my marriage, but that on top of that, the church would let me go, because that was, I believe, unacceptable for them. So one of the things, the paradox of all that was always, and the irony was the fact that I remember specifically telling the pastor, so instead of coming alongside me and working with me through something that is so horribly difficult and traumatic, I would be punished instead and said, you're gone. So one of my greatest fears, which was to lose the ministry, to lose what I believe to be one of my loves in life, was taken away, and it was done in a very demeaning and cruel manner. I saw it as an injustice, and when you're going through that pain, that agony of seeing yourself in a place of injustice, of unfairness, and the dynamics of everything that took place during that time was very, very hard.
Yeah, I imagine.
It's very difficult to have a positive perspective. It's very difficult to be intentional. It's very difficult to trust in yourself. It's very difficult to see anything positive come from that, because you, at that point when that took place, I remember that the three people who had walked alongside me and who knew the whole story saw that what had taken place was unjust as well. So to some degree I felt validated by that. But nobody can actually help you through the pain and the anger and the bitterness that you feel at that point. So the losses were huge. When I made the decision that I would separate from my husband and inevitably divorce, I took my risks. I knew I had to end the hypocrisy in which I was living, in the sense that I continued in a church where I knew that I was not given the freedom to be everything that I could be.
Right.
So I had to make a decision to that degree as well, and come up front and say, this is what I'm going to be doing and this is my plan, knowing that most likely the end result of the outcome would not be beneficial to myself. I remember one day, shortly thereafter, feeling so at a loss and feeling insignificant in life and purposeless, and wondering whether I had ever contributed anything to life, because when all of a sudden all your sense of security is taken away from you, and your sense of not only security and safety but of significance is taken away from you, that's pretty huge.
It's a big deal.
It's a big deal. So I remember sitting in front of what used to be my place in a little town away from here, and thinking to myself, at this very moment where I am, I have lost a brand new house. I have lost my reputation. I have lost my friends. I have lost ministry. I have lost marriage. I have lost so much. And interestingly enough, I clearly remember all of a sudden just coming to a recognition that I was in a space of complete uncertainty, of complete insecurity, of complete instability. Everything that was significant to me was not there. And I remember smiling to myself and thinking, I'm okay. I am okay. And from that moment, I began to enter into a place of recognition of what these endings, as horrific as I saw them to be, what those endings would bring in my life. And I knew that the chapters were closed, and I knew that I couldn't be angry with anyone, because in our stories, we always contribute. We're always contributors.
We are.
And I had to come to the realization that I was a contributor to the end of my marriage. I was a contributor to the end of the ministry. I was a contributor to the end of the church. I was a contributor to all those things that were my story.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't blame anyone, you know, even though the temptation to blame was so
Sure.
huge. And I wanted to blame. I wanted to blame. But I realized I could no longer do that if I was going to make the choice of seeing the promise of a new horizon. If I was going to be looking at the fact that there was a new beginning ahead for me, and that I needed to find my way in the midst of the struggle, in the midst of the pain, in the midst of uncertainty and instability and insecurity. I needed to find myself.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how I was going to do that. The only thing that I did do was that every choice and every decision I needed to make along the way, and every occasion, every day of life, I would reflect upon.
Right.
And as I reflected, I began to be incredibly aware of everything that was taking place. For 15 years, I've been somebody who people have come to for counsel, for suggestions, for advice, for guidance. And I felt I had no one to turn to. I had to turn inwardly. I had to turn to myself. And everything that I had spoken into people's lives, I had to relearn for myself.
Sure. Yeah.
And a shift had to take place, because I was in a place of learning, and I was in a place where what was once theoretical was becoming life for me.
Yeah.
And the path was, it has been indescribable. It has been a path where self-awareness has catapulted me to a different sense of serenity and peace. And I've had to reevaluate values, reevaluate beliefs, reevaluate faith, reevaluate friendship, reevaluate relationships, reevaluate everything in life. Everything that meant something at one point, I had to come to terms of, what does it mean now?
Yeah.
And what importance does it have in my life? Does it have any? That which at one point I saw as something that I needed to cling to and hold on to and have in order for survival,
Yeah.
I realized soon enough that I no longer needed it.
Mm-hmm.
Everything started shifting, priorities started shifting, values shifting, everything did. And I've been thankful for all the endings and the losses, because it has brought me to a place of new beginnings. And of course, the new beginnings will come with its endings as well.
Sure. Yeah. Well,
that's in a
that's
nutshell.
Awesome.
A little bit of my story.
First of all, just way to go to be so brave to come out and just like share so real, like so with so much realism, and to be so raw and share your story this way.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I'm sure that there are people out there, Kelly, you probably are seeing people out there that have commented on this story as we've just gone along. And yeah, you know, like I shared a story, and you're right. Everybody has a different story, don't we? You know? And one of the things that has to be shared too is that not everybody's story is something where there's necessarily something majorly positive that can happen, in the way that you know, if you're in a wheelchair, maybe you can't actually have that positive, like I'm gonna run again. And I have some clients that I have a deep passion for that are in wheelchairs. And one of those clients, his name is Victor. And Victor has an incredible story. And I told Victor he's going to be watching, and his mom and dad are watching right now, actually. And I can just see Maggie, you're just jumping through the screen right now. You're glowing. That I'm going to tell this story. And I want to tell you this story, and I want everybody that's watching to hear the story as I share it, because I think that it's important, it's powerful. Victor is around 50 years old, and he has MS, and he has it to the degree that he's actually restricted to a wheelchair. Some people may have written him off in some ways because the way that the disease has affected him. He sometimes repeats himself, and sometimes It's harder for him to retain information. Now, I think Victor's so smart. Like when he's on, he's got so much brilliance in him, and I see that. I also get to spend an hour a week with him, and he still beats me in chess almost every time whenever we play. Victor told me a while ago, and I don't know, Adam, if there's a possibility of you playing his little intro video or getting Victor's intro video queued up. That would be really cool if there's a possibility of us doing. We had some technical difficulties earlier, so maybe that's not possible, but we'll see, Adam, if you can do that. And if you even want to just like play it and then just have the little green bars around it, that would be cool. Victor had a passion to write stories. And I thought, wow, how fitting. I kind of weave this topic around something that he had. And he wants to tell stories, but he doesn't have as much accessibility to tell stories and then have the world find out about it. Well, I have the fortune of having thousands of people who are invited to this call or to this video TV, and I have the privilege of just wanting to connect people and to communicate messages. And I want to share Victor's story with you. Victor had an inspiration when he first heard the starfish story. So, and if you haven't heard the starfish story, it basically goes like this. All of a sudden, one day at dawn, an old man was standing on the beach, and he saw a young man throwing starfish or throwing something into the ocean. And the old man went up to the young man and went, "Young man, what are you doing?" He had all this joy and this glee in his eyes as he was throwing these starfish into the ocean. He's like, "There's so many starfish out there. How could you possibly save them all?" And he said, "Well, if I don't save them, then they're going to die." And the old man persisted, saying, "Well, but it's like, look at the beach. There's thousands of miles of beach. Surely you can't save them all." "That's why I can make a difference to this one," the young man said back to the old man. And he threw that starfish back into the ocean. And how cool is that story? Because in life, it's kind of like that parallel too with us where I think about my life. And sometimes I think, okay, well, I can't make a difference to all these people. There's a lot of starving people in Africa, but I can sponsor two. And I can make a difference in their lives. And I know that there's people, actually, Kane, if you're still on here, man, I'm so proud of you. My brother-in-law, Kane, he just did a bike ride, 200K bike ride.
Wow.
Yeah, it's incredible. And it was for cancer, and his mom passed away this past year of cancer. And he can make a difference to somebody for cancer treatments. And there is a difference that you can make for one. Mm-hmm. Right? So Victor told a story. And this story, I think, is just incredible. I'm just going to share it here with you. And Victor's idea was that he wanted to come up with the second thoughts on the starfish story. And Adam, is it possible to watch the video at all? And I'm here with Victor. Say hi, Victor. Hello. All right. And we are in a coaching session right now in March the 7th. And right now we're talking about, and we have been talking about some of Victor's big dreams that he has. And we've talked about some books and some other things. Would you be able to tell me what your dream is? And just start at the beginning.
Well, my dream is to write a book that's got the chapter 2 on all these great little stories. So what I'll do is I'll give the quote, the full reference to where I got it from. Mm-hmm. For instance, the starfish story. I found that one on the internet. It's just a little story.
Yeah, why don't you say what that story is?
Well, this is about a man who was visiting the coast. Mm-hmm. And he was watching this boy young man looked like he was dancing to greet the sunrise.
Mm-hmm.
He thought that was kind of cool. And then he went a little closer and saw what he was actually doing. He wasn't just bending down and then jumping up. He was bending down and picking up a starfish and throwing it back out to sea.
Mm-hmm.
He was saving their individual lives. The old man saw thousands of starfish, and he thought it rather pointless. So he explained to the young man, what you're doing is making no difference at all. And the young man just bent down, picked one up, and threw it back out to sea. He says it made a difference to that one. So he was saving the life of his starfish. Someone. I like that story.
It's a great story, isn't it?
Yeah. And I had read it before and I liked it. And then one night I was sitting at a recovery meeting, and for some reason 2 bubbles sort of went down my head.
Mm-hmm.
They were encompassed. It wasn't a visual thing, it felt like 2 drops of rain. And the first one was that story. And the second one was chapter 2, which I had never heard. And that got me thinking that I should write this down. Because there was no chapter 2 that I know of. And I wrote it. It came to me when the drop exploded like a dream. Just poof.
Cool. And that inspiration has remained with you. And part of the reason why I know that it's remained with you is because you talk about it. You and I talk about this, frequently, about the ideas that you have. And those ideas keep on coming up. And they grow a little bit sometimes when we talk about them too. So what did you take from Victor's story?
It's the legacy, right? What you leave behind. I mean, it can be multiplied. The more people that are influenced by what you do, the more they will do the same, right? It's the effect that takes place. That's permanent. It's a legacy.
That's awesome. It's so true, Victor. I'm proud of you, man. You did an awesome job, and you're right. He wanted to leave a legacy, and actually, this is the legacy that Victor in the pen writing this actually came to. And Victor couldn't actually write this. He has very little mobility with his hands. So I actually wrote it. And all I did was I asked him a bunch of questions. Okay, what happened next? It's like, okay, they were throwing frisbees. Okay, sounds great. I wrote it down. And we just put the words together. And he wrote this. And Victor, I'm sharing this right now because I caught your vision. Because you told me that you wanted your story just to be heard. And you didn't have an avenue really for that to be heard. Well, this is on public TV, on the internet right now, and your story was heard. So for anybody on the chat room, anybody who watches this replay, that was a story from Victor DeFair. And it's called Second Thoughts on the Starfish Story. And you're right, it's about making a difference to all that we can. Yeah, we only have so many days in our life. We only have so many days to tell our story. So it's so vital and so important to tell our story, isn't it?
And we tell our story in different ways. It can be written, it can be in poetry, it can be in song, it can be in small gestures. It's about just being willing.
Yeah.
Being willing. And we don't have to share all of our story.
Yeah.
We can share bits and pieces of it.
Yeah.
Our stories have impact.
Yeah.
Because they're ours. And the greatest part of it is that the more you hear other people's stories, the more you realize we're no different. We share the same pain, we share the same hurt, the same brokenness, and the same celebrations. It's just experienced differently. So we are all one that way.
Yes.
And the more we hear each other's stories, the more we learn. And when we hear something, all of a sudden it'll trigger something within us, and it'll help us to reflect upon that, or somehow it's prolonged in our memory and we may not even realize why it's there. And then something happens and we get it.
Awesome. It's so true.
Yeah.
So true. And there's one other thing that I want to share about stories, as you were saying that I think really is powerful too, is the openness that we have to hear other people's stories. You know, busy. Everything's busy, right? And to stop and say, okay, I'm taking some time out. Somebody started something, and they're probably only going to tell us this little slice. But I can tell you countless times when I've just stopped myself to hear somebody's story, hear what's going on with them. And I can tell a quick story about, I was recently on an airplane. I was flying back from Abbotsford, and I had the privilege of jumping from the airplane, getting on the airplane and sitting beside an elderly lady. And she actually recently lost her husband. And we had a captive audience. And I could have just done what a lot of people do and stared forward. But I didn't. I started to talk with her. And she shared the most incredible story that just sticks with me. And because of that, too, I had an opportunity to share with her. And she had a hard time because everything was with her husband. And one of the challenges that I gave to her is that she would actually go out and do some of the things that she's passionate about. We talked about her passions again. And she recognized that she really could do some of those things again. And that really made a big difference for her. So listening, you have so much power to receive a message and to also be able to like insert and just to hear and give a message as well. So which is really cool. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, this has been great.
Great opportunity.
Awesome. I'm gonna ask Kelly to come on the
Absolutely.
stage here just for a sec, well, for a minute, and I may get you to come back a little bit later. We may do a life wheel thing. All right, cool. Kelly, you're the man. Now, Kelly Goyer's been in my network for a good while, and I've been just so privileged to have somebody on my team, on the abundance coaching team like Kelly. And one of the major reasons for that is that I just feel that Kelly has an incredible spirit. He's kind and he's passionate. He has a loyalty that's just stretches to the moon, and he's the exact guy that you would want to have on your team. So, yeah. So I'm going to invite Kelly here just in a moment to come up. And Kelly, don't worry about the mic thing. We got this here. We're going with Plan B.
This is Plan B country.
This is Plan B.
Yeah.
All right. Wonderful.
Hi, everybody out there. Thanks for your comments. It's been great chatting back and forth with all of you.
Yeah. Wonderful. So now you get to see the man behind the computer that's been chatting away with you. That's awesome. Very cool. Very cool. All right. Kelly.
Scott.
I have brought you on the show here because I think you are an amazing man. And I'm going to use that word because I love that word, and it's part of my fascination statement. And I have to give credit to Tim McGrath if he watches this show, because I was away in San Diego at something called the Coaching Leadership Academy, and when I came back, I told you about this story. Yes. When I came back, there was a stepping in for me that was like no other time in my life. And part of that stepping in was to actually know in my heart of hearts, deep in my gut, what it is that I do and what I love to do, right? And I told you, and I've told the audience here, my fascination statement, what makes me different, is that I help people connect with their authentic, amazing self so that they can live with passion and have abundance in life. And there's something incredible when you actually come through something like that and you actually experience something like that where somebody else brings you right on that par where you could say, that clicked with me. That clicked. And it was just like, it was like that hit home.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Ted, when you're watching this, you know that was a major, major difference maker for me.
Mm-hmm. You touched somebody, Ted.
There you go. Awesome. And mate, I have to talk to you about this story. There was something that changed. We had a conversation. I did a live telesummit recently, and you hosted it for me.
Yeah.
And we just we talked for an hour and a half after that thing. And you were sharing part of the story was just like, in my energy, you noticed how different I was.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And you were like, man, I feel elevated as a result.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you want to share a little bit about that?
Well, sure. First, let me just start by saying that I think a lot of people are under the impression that we are primarily beings that think. We define ourselves by our thinking, and we do things through our thinking, and that seems to be the primary way people have conceived of themselves. And one of the amazing things about the story I could tell about the summit that you were participating in, and my experience with that was the realization that we are not thinking creatures. We're really energetic creatures, right? And that is what allowed me to have the experience working on that summit with you, where I was tapped into the energy that was coming off of you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you were very much in the zone, and you were coming from a place where you were deeply passionate and deeply motivated to live that passion out.
Yeah.
In a way that touches people, that moves people, that helps people connect in some way. And I don't know if anyone could have been a part of that summit and not been touched somehow by your conviction and again, and the energy that you were generating as part of that experience.
Yeah. And that flowed, because I can't say that the energy part that we're talking about, that flowed from my weekend at the Coaching Leadership Academy.
Absolutely.
In and through me. And it wasn't that a lot of new concepts came to me. It was that, okay, this is a for real thing. I'm a full-time coach, and I actually know that I'm going 80% of the way. What's it going to take to jump in and go all in?
Well, Jaqueline and I were just talking about this before she came on to the show, and we were talking about getting out of your own way, right? And really, that's what you're describing is in that moment during that summit, from start to finish, beginning with when you came away from Ted's workshop, all the way through to when you presented that TEL Summit, you had been galvanized, energized in a way that you were completely out of your own way. You weren't holding yourself back. You weren't second-guessing your own knowledge, your own wisdom. You were just going for it, right? And instead of jumping in at 80, you jumped in with a full 100.
Nice.
And that's the difference that it can make.
Yeah. Awesome. So cool. So cool. I've seen you come as well since then.
Sure.
And that's the cool thing, right? So we talked about stories. We talked about like the reality of stories and the pits of some of our stories. I talked about a little bit about my pit and my story, and how it took me off of my path that really I needed to find it in the end, which is what I do now. But also we talked a little bit about, well, I talked with Jaqueline about her story and actually the pit that went along with that as well. And this is a little bit different. It's a little bit different side of a story, right? When we have the fact that somebody else comes along our way and actually gives us something. It's like you're given a nugget, and then you have the opportunity to say, okay, well, what am I going to do with this nugget?
Right. Yeah.
And it doesn't mean, with the stories, it doesn't mean that you have to have this fantastically huge and dramatic story that makes the moon shake about how you were at the most desperate place to make a difference, right?
No, definitely not. We are all living our own life story, and those most inspiring stories for all of us don't necessarily have to have, all of the journey through darkness elements, right? Any piece of a story can be very inspiring for someone.
Yeah.
While you were speaking with Jaqueline, I was just chatting with the folks online and
Sure.
just putting questions out there to them in terms of, what's their story? I mean, what's your story, right? And I think that's a very important point to make, Scott, because there's no right or wrong story for anyone to live it, right? Your story is your story, and the real power for you and the real growth for you comes when you're able to sort of step back from your story and just take a look at it, right? And where are the points in your story that you've been a real champion and you've accessed that power within you to be great, and where in your story have you not so much, right? And take away from that what you need in order to live the life that that calls to you silently in the back of your mind, because that's the life that's waiting for you, really.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. I was at a Toastmasters convention this weekend, and I guess what I'd love to say about myself is that I love to find people that I think are shining stars. And there's one person that I met that I just saw something that was great in her. She was one of the presenters, actually, and I talked to her a little bit later. I singled her out, and I talked to her a little bit later, and I asked her, I said, well, what do you do? She said, well, I work at Sobeys. And she said it kind of like that, well, I work at Sobeys. And, well, that was like an immediate, just like, really? She's like, yeah, that kind of response. And I said, why aren't you into motivational speaking? She says, you're phenomenal. And she's like, yeah, I've heard that before, but I don't know how to do it. Like one of those type of things, right?
For sure.
And Jaqueline, I don't know if you're watching it or you'll watch the replay. What I shared with her was, in what she said, very inspiring, because I just started to lay out how she could do some of the things that she never thought that she could do. She had some limiting beliefs as to how she could foresee that, and perhaps even coaching is in her cards. That's something that she might want to do, and her horizons are expanded as far as that. But one thing I remember that she told me, she said, but I've heard that to be a motivational speaker, you have to have gone through something. You have to have had like a drug addiction or something like that. I've heard. And I just want to cut that one off at the root and share, you do not have to have that kind of story. In fact, praise God, you don't have to have that story. Like, Kelly, I know that you haven't had terrible despair, but don't become a drug addict before you go off and you
just
do
so
your
like motivational speaker.
Don't do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And sometimes if that is your story, cool, use that. Let that be an influence. That's phenomenal, right? But the day-to-day aspects of your story can make a massive difference. And I want to share that with you. I want to leave that with you. We're coming up to the end of our show here real quick. But the takeaways that I hope that you get out of this show are that you actually know that your story is important, that your story is valuable, that you have something important to give, you have something important to share. And perhaps there's something that you took out of my story that I shared about just losing my passion and finding it. And there's maybe something you got out of Jaqueline's story about losses and new beginnings. And maybe something about what we just talked about here, with just a motivator that just came up beside you and just like gave you that nugget that just helped spur you forward. Or that your story really does have impact. Your story really does matter. And it is really important. So if you can take those away, that's awesome. I want to leave one extra thing. There's one segment that I always want to include just to give value to everybody that stayed on the show this long. And that's to give you a free tool. So every time I want to give you a free tool. So the free tool this week is your Abundance Life Wheel game. And all you have to do is go to www.abundancelifewheel.com. And you'll be able to actually find out if you're winning or losing at your game of life. Now, the game itself is totally free, and I built it with the aspect of I wanted to help people figure out where they are so that we can get them moving forward faster. So at the heart of the game, I wanted people to understand and to visually see where they were so that they can start to make steps forward and push themselves forward and to elevate themselves to actually get to where they really need to go. And the Abundance Life Wheel game goes through 14 categories that essentially make up the human existence. And we put a lot of thought, a lot of energy, and almost a year of time into creating it. I say we, me and my wife, and our coding team and designers. What you can get out of this is something incredible. You can get awareness and clarity. You will see where your balance is in your life. You will also see where the momentum is in your life. And the benefits to actually getting clarity and figuring out where you are immense. Immense. If you don't know where you're going, if you don't know where you are, you won't know where you're going. And Socrates says, and I'll repeat this, is one of my favorite quotes, an unexamined life is not worth living. So if you're not checking in with yourself, finding out where you are, then it's hard to actually know where you're going and if he's right, whether or not your life is even worth living. So what's a takeaway? You played the game. What's a takeaway that you've taken away from playing the game?
Well, definitely it gets you thinking about your own life and yourself in a way that that just, let's face it, just does not come up in regular day-to-day experience.
Yeah.
And that's been my biggest takeaway is the opportunity that the Abundance Life Wheel game gives you in just finding, just a 10, 15 minute time slot for yourself. And let's face it, you're all worth it, right?
Yeah.
And looking at things from a slightly different perspective, asking yourself questions about yourself that you've likely not had a lot of time or opportunity to ask before, right? And the other takeaway for me was the resistance sometimes that can come up when we're doing something for ourselves. I have to admit that this was something that I'm not used to doing. And there was, that little voice inside my head that said, well, geez, you're being kind of selfish, you're being kind of self-focused here, this is unusual, who do you think you are, and all that kind of stuff. And, just sort of, I was able to just kind of, okay, thanks very much for your input, but I'm going to do this anyway kind of thing. And that was, there's a bit of growth there for me, because it gave me the opportunity to choose again. Right, and to choose that, I am worth a few minutes here and working on my life and looking to get more out of my life from a rewarding and a generative perspective, not from a selfish, sort of materialistic kind of.
Yeah, that's right.
So.
That's right. Awesome. So again, you can go to abundancelifewheel.com, just exactly as it sounds, abundancelifewheel.com, and you can play your game for free. And I hope that you actually get the clarity that you need to find, because sometimes there's areas that you need to actually work on in your life, and you don't know necessarily where it is. One of the things that I often discuss with my clients is, in life there's not very many measuring sticks on how you are doing. And there's a lot of measuring sticks in sales if you're working in sales, or if you're in business, there's measuring sticks on how successful you are. And in life, there just really isn't those measuring sticks. But this is one way of you actually seeing a big snapshot picture of where your life is and looking at the abundance and where you actually are in your life by playing your Abundance Life Wheel game. So I challenge you to do that, abundancelifewheel.com, and there you go. So it has been an absolute joy to be here, and I thank you, Kelly, for being my guest.
Absolutely.
It's been awesome.
Absolutely.
You bet, man.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have you on the show again.
Sure.
Because you're on the team.
Yep.
And we're going to interview some really neat people. And the reason why we want to actually interview people is also because we think that other people have incredible stories. So if you have an incredible story and you want to actually be on the show, we do Skype calls and we do live calls here in Saskatoon. We're going to do it every week, and we're going to stop just before Christmas for the first series. So the first series is all about helping you live with passion and have abundance in your life. So we talk about stories. Next session, we're actually going to talk about who you are and what your passion is. So who you are and what your passion is. That's a big one. Who you are is one of the questions that comes up a lot. And I get the question about passion all the time as well. How do you live with passion? What does it mean to have passion? So we're going to actually dive deep into that. I'll have another special guest. Nick is going to be with me, and he actually works with with Donna in a yoga studio, and he's got an incredible story as well, and he's an incredibly passionate person. I'll send some details on the website for that, abundancecoaching.ca/TV. So we're going to air every single Wednesday. We'll be on time now. We'll figure this techie stuff out. At 7 o'clock, that's Central Standard Time. That'll be 5 o'clock Pacific Time and 8 o'clock Eastern Time. 12 o'clock if you're out in Sydney, it'll be 12 o'clock noon the next day. So again, on the 14th of November and every Wednesday afterwards at the same time, 7 o'clock Central Standard Time. It has been a pleasure spending time with you here. Jaqueline, I thank you so much for being part of it. And our team, our production team, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being part of it. Until we chat again, live with passion and have abundance in life.